Okay, thank you very much to the organizers for having me. Is this the, okay. Um, this work is funded by the NSF and is co-authored with Kathleen Mullen, who's at the University of Oregon and part of CIPHER. This is a fun project because I get to think about being burned out and how much I love my job. And oh, by the way, I'll be starting a new job in a month. This work is ongoing work. And we really started to think about the problem of burnout as we started to see this in the news media. People are leaving their jobs. It's a great recession. Everyone is burned out. But there isn't actually that much going on right now to study really what that means in a scientific way. Burnout does have a scientific definition. It's a syndrome characterized by feelings of exhaustion, cynicism, and low professional efficacy. We're all here today, so we're doing okay. But being burned out is associated with low retention in your job. People don't want to stay in their jobs. They have poor health outcomes. It's actually not just a feeling of being tired. And our study has found that feelings of burnout are currently very high. 21% of people reported that feelings of burnout were a major concern, but 60% of people said it was a concern. And only 40% of people said it wasn't a concern. So in a probability-based sample of working people, we're seeing a lot of burnout. What causes burnout? What are the characteristics of your work life that make you burned out? Workload, feelings of control over what you do, the community that you have around you. Do you get to work with the same people over and over again that you like, or do you have to work with people you don't like? Are you rewarded appropriately for the work that you do? Does your job treat you fairly? And are your feelings generally aligned with the values of the place that you work? In this work, we're going to think about whether or not people are willing to pay, that is, willing to give up wages or accept higher wages to change their job characteristics as they relate to burnout. So would you take a worse job for more money? Would you take a better job for less money? That's basically the research question. Previous literature has shown that people are willing to forego earnings for a variety of better working conditions. Some of this is work from my co-author. In this paper, we're going to estimate, eventually, this is very preliminary work, we're going to estimate how much people value working conditions associated with burnout. And this is an experimental study using the RAND American Life panel. We have approximately 800 respondents who were working in February 2020 when this particular project started, and in December of 2022. They didn't have to be in the same job, but to enter our study, they had to have been working back in February of 2020 before the pandemic. We were really interested in understanding how the pandemic was going to affect people's work lives. And to answer questions about whether or not you would change jobs to avoid burnout, you have to have a job, because we can't compare it to your job if you don't. So we're merging two surveys from the ALP in this particular presentation. The first is based on actual working conditions and information about the burnout that people are experiencing and the working conditions that might contribute to burnout. The second is an experiment that uses vignettes to describe the work environment and a hypothetical job offer based on working conditions that are related to burnout. So here's an example of one of the surveys that we ask people, survey questions that we ask people, one of our vignettes. The first thing we had to do was figure out, how do we ask people about job characteristics that contribute to burnout? No job posting is ever going to say, hey, your job is going to suck. Your boss is going to make you work at 11 o'clock at night every night. They're not going to be fair to you, and you're not going to get paid as much as you think you deserve. Maybe they might tell you how much you get paid, but they're not going to tell you those honest facts about the job. So how are we going to give people a sense of these characteristics that are soft, hard to measure, and very hard to observe in actual working situations? So what we did was we asked them to imagine a job offer that was similar to the job that they currently have in many senses. And then imagine that they have a friend who works in this new job and tells them something about their job. So here's an example of one of the things that your friend might tell you about the job. This is related to workload, and it's particularly related to work-life balance. So are you worrying about work when you're not at work? Are you too tired after work to do things in your private life? Does it prevent you from doing the things you want to do with your family? And then we offered them a wage for this new job. My new job has never prevented me from doing things with. I know. Then we offered them a wage. This wage is actually based on an individual's wage. So at the beginning of the survey, we asked them how much they make and how often they get paid so that we could put these wages in the context of their true job. So in this case, this person who has a current wage of $20 per hour is being asked if they would take a 16% wage cut to not have a problem with work-life balance. Think about that. It's a big wage cut, but you could own your life. And then we used an unfolding brackets situation, as unfolding brackets scenario to narrow down their willingness to pay. So if they liked the job that we offered them, then we would see if they would do it when we offered them less money. And if they didn't like the job, we would see if they would do it when we offered them more money. So here's the follow-up question. In this case, we're saying if you weren't willing to take a 16% wage cut, would you take an 8% wage cut to have better work-life balance? And so this allows us to narrow in their willingness to pay. We did this for 9 different vignettes that are related to experiences, working conditions that contribute to burnout. So we asked about workload in terms of work-life balance, workload pace. Do you have to work really fast? Reward, that's how you're compensated for your job. How much control you have over how you do your work, how much control you have over when you do your work, whether or not your job is fair to you, whether or not the people that you work with treat you with trust and respect. This next one is about whether or not you have a working condition that contributes where you might experience physical or verbal abuse. Hopefully none of the people in this room have that experience, but definitely during the pandemic, there were a lot of people working in service industries who were reporting verbal abuse. And so we wanted to make sure that we captured that. And the last series of questions is about your boss and whether or not you like your boss. So we had positive and negative framings for every question. These are the 2 questions, and they're similar except for the frequency that you experience this. So you rarely worry about work when you're not working, or you very often worry about work when you're not working. And for each of these questions, we had similar positive and negative framings. In each of the vignettes that we offered people much preferred to stay in their current job than in the job that we offered them. Between 80 and 90% in most cases, preferring to stay in their current job versus changing jobs. About half of respondents said that they would prefer to stay in their current job for all 9 of the vignettes that they saw, which means that about half of respondents would accept at least one of these vignette jobs. We also see differences by framing. In some cases, people were more likely to want to stay in their current job if they had the positive framing opposed to the negative framing, and in some cases, the opposite. So the most notable differences where people wanted to stay in their current job with positive framing had to do with working to tight deadlines and having to take on unforeseen tasks. So these are cases where the positive amenity isn't really good enough to want to leave your current job. You have a low willingness to pay to avoid these kinds of things. And then in the negative cases, these are situations where the amenities that we're talking about are a lot worse. So you're not willing to leave your job to have a bad work-life balance. You're not willing to leave your job to be in a place where people treat you unfairly. And you're not willing to leave in your job to have a bad boss, which it makes sense as you think about it, that these working conditions that have to do with the pace of work aren't as bad as the working conditions that have to do with really really bad situations, unfair boss, unfair conditions, bad boss. I'm happy to say
You're looking at job.
That's okay. I think that this hits close to home. So the first thing is just, it's good to say that the acceptance of offered jobs is positively correlated with the wage that we offer people. If we offer you more money, you're more likely to take a job. So all of our questions actually came from survey questions we've been asking people about their working conditions. We asked them the exact wording that you saw in our vignettes. So this means that we can go, and we did that in the previous survey. This means that we can go back into the data and say, do people who have low experiences of working conditions that relate to burnout actually not care about these problems as much as people who have really bad working conditions? So we have that connection between them, and they are described in exactly the same way. And so we can construct an index for each of the vignettes and the individual's own experience, and score that, and then assess whether the acceptance of offered jobs is related to the experienced working conditions. The short answer is yes. This is just one example. You can see that people who have low baseline scores, that means they have worse working conditions, are slightly more likely to accept the jobs when we have a positive framing than when they have better working conditions. And similarly, slightly more likely when they have bad working conditions in the negative job framing. So I'll conclude by saying that we developed an innovative way to measure preferences for working conditions that are hard to quantify and hard to observe. In most cases, respondents are not reporting a willingness to leave their current jobs. This could be a reflection of status quo bias. This could be that you don't really want to move away from what you have. You know what you have. The devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't know. And that the offered wages that we're giving people are not actually high enough to get them to take really bad jobs. We do see that incentives matter. Economists are always happy when the results say that incentives matter. People are more likely to accept jobs when the wage is higher. And people whose own experiences are negative, if you're in a bad job, you're more likely to say in this survey that you're willing to take a new job. We still have a lot to do. We've only had these data for about a month, and we're continuing to refine our analysis to take into account the fact that people were offered multiple wages, and considering the demographic differences. We actually still need to get that dollar amount for you about how much people are willing to pay to avoid a bad job. And we want to further refine how the experiences of burnout and negative working conditions affect the willingness to pay. Thank you.